Boys, another episode. Can anyone guess why this episode is a little bit important? We're at episode 100. 100 episodes we've done. I cannot believe it. It feels like only yesterday that we started this potty, and obviously we've done an episode nearly every single week. I think we missed a week or two, like one or two at Christmas, one during the retreat, maybe one here and there, but we've literally gone non-stop since we've started. How do you boys feel? Like, Scotty, reflect a little bit. 100 episodes.
Yeah, it's full on. Or even if you think about the average, I wouldn't even be able to tell you what the average duration of our episodes are. I'm going to guess it's like 60 to 75 minutes. So that's over 100 hours of us just chatting all things bodybuilding. It's just being sat in a room for 4 days straight, just throwing out facts, talking nonsense. Nah, it's been good. It's funny you do say it feels like it has gone quite quickly. Obviously, we started it. I was in Australia. We're finishing it, or we're at episode 100. We're not finishing the podcast, but I'm in the UK. But I'm excited for how much progress we've made, but equally the direction with what it's going. Obviously, there's a few exciting things in the pipe works. It's hopefully going to take it to a different level, which is good.
What do you think, MG?
Man, I as you guys know, I judged an amazing show on the weekend, which we'll probably get into a little bit later. But I was introduced as one of the co-hosts of the Prep Coach podcast, so it got to the top of the list. So the Prep Coach podcast is like the thing that kind of, is of the highest caliber in an introduction. I was like, that's kind of special, just me and my best mates talking shit, and all of a sudden it's now a thing in the industry. And I got to meet a lot of amazing athletes on the weekend who live, in outer Victoria, and it's just crazy where the reach is. And even MT, this has happened to you as well, but some husbands of some of the competitors coming up to me and being like, I see you every Saturday morning on screen. It's like they don't follow the sport, but they still know who we are because their partners are listening to us religiously, whether it's on a car ride or on YouTube on a Saturday or Sunday morning. So it's pretty special. And one of the things that they said, and I'll talk about Roe and Juz in the show in a bit, but they said these guys are the ones in the industry who literally give out all the right, correct, and honest information purely just to give back and to help everyone. And they were funny enough to say, in fact, they've basically coached some of these athletes today without officially coaching these athletes today. So it was a really sweet thing to say, but it definitely hit home for me. I felt really proud of us in that moment and what we've been able to do. And, like Scott said, 100 weeks, virtually not missing a week is quite a big achievement. So really, really proud of you guys and proud of the podcast.
That's one of the biggest things is we did this with the mission of just giving back and just trying to help as many people as possible. And I'm really glad that we are committed to that mission, but also we're being successful in it too. I actually met a lot of people on the weekend that said, are you Michael Trimboli? I listen to you every single weekend. And I'm like, the first thing I say is, you must be absolutely sick of my voice by now because you constantly listen to me. But yeah, it's amazing the people that we meet. I was actually talking to some people before about, how was the weekend? How was the Nationals? I said, my most favorite part now about going to shows is talking to everyone, talking to competitors, talking to athletes. That's like one of my best parts. Like obviously coaching people and making sure that clients are enjoying themselves, but I just love just talking to people, and that's what it's all about when I go to a show now. So it's absolutely awesome. But while we're talking about MG, tell us about your weekend. Tell us about the show that you judged and what it's like being a judge.
Man, it was awesome. I had such a great day. So for anyone who doesn't know, I went and judged the WHPH, which is Work Hard, Play Hard gym down in Lang Lang, on the way to sort of Phillip Island. For those that don't know, Roe and Juz are the directors down there, and started off by running a show. Now we call it is a proper federation, but running a show for sort of their members who had an interest in the sport and certainly were enjoying the journey of bodybuilding and transformation, but potentially weren't quite ready to step on to, say, an ICN or an NBA stage at that point. So they opened up a door for people to be able to compete and feel the sport. And it's just grown in leaps and bounds for them. It was an incredible show. It was a completely different feel. The categories are different. There was the opportunity for the athletes to have a lot of stage time. They have a category which is called their transformation category. So people who have undergone, a really drastic transformation. There was actually, I think, 13 or 14 competitors on the stage at that one time. men and women, all with different stories. And one of the things that the guys did, and it was a beautiful moment. I actually sort of half emceed the show as well as doing all the call outs. But they had a screen on the side with an image of where they were, and then a story as to how they've gotten to where they've gotten to now, and then got all the athletes to do a front double bicep and a back double bicep. And the crowd, it was quite emotional. The crowd went wild, and then myself, Amy, and Bruce had to somehow pick 3 winners out of 15 incredible transformations. And we're not talking about just weight loss. We're talking about people who have overcome ED, so eating disorders. A guy on stage that had lost above 75 kilos, some female competitors that have lost 60 and 70, and some girls on stage there was a girl on stage, she took out the fitness overall. When she walked out for the transformation category, I'm like, what? She won the fitness overall. Not knowing, when her before photo came up, I was like, what the hell? So, what those guys have done is created their own kind of little niche there. And I think that, that's something that they should continue forever. But it was an awesome day judging. We had some 12 and 13 competitor lineups, which was pretty mind-boggling. Sports model was huge. Bikini was obviously huge. And their swimsuit was also massive. So I had a great day. I was able to co-judge with Amy, who MT coaches, who was an incredible fitness pro and world champion herself, and we just had so much fun on the mic and being able to switch people around. But I got to say, I prefer to be a promoter or a director of a federation well above and beyond judging. I actually found it really, really difficult. And you know what one of the most challenging things was? So credit to the judges, and you guys, you can see how little we have to do with judging when we're running a show. Trying to calculate scores when there's 12 people and you've only got a certain amount of time and get 3 or 4 judges to agree, it's actually really, really difficult. So hats off to any judges of any federations. It is a really, really difficult task, but I thoroughly, thoroughly enjoyed the day. And I'll just finish by saying, if you're a coach out there and you're listening and you're wanting a show for your athletes to sort of put them in as a lead up to, say, NBA is their first show or ICN is their first show, go out and give the guys support. They ran a great day, and it was a really lovely experience. So definitely one to put in your calendar for Season B.
That's awesome. They're doing a Season B show, right?
August 25th, yep.
That's amazing. That's awesome.
Yeah,
that's so good. And they're massive supporters of the industry too. So I wish them all the best. They're absolutely amazing. So that is so cool.
Yeah, now, and I sort of, I likened them on the day to a little bit like us. You guys have heard me say it before, and I use the word regularly, so sorry, but I love genuine custodians of our sport, because sometimes it gets a bad rap, but there's certainly a group of people within our state and within our country who, like the 3 of us, are so passionate about the industry that we only want to see it, displayed in a good light, and are willing to do whatever it takes to show that it is such a great sport for so many people, and they definitely fit into that category. So
that's awesome. That is so good. And some people, actually, we've got a question here or there about you walking a little bit gingerly with your back. So give us maybe a bit of an update on what the back situation is with you at the moment.
Yeah, so unfortunately, it feels like it's come out of nowhere. Scott and I have worked me through a couple of little niggles in the past with some light twinges in sort of the lower lumbar. But on Tuesday, I got out of the shower. I was drying myself with a towel. I wish it was a more elaborate story, and just felt, a subtle pop, nothing too crazy loud, but definitely a pop that I was then stuck in that position. So if you can imagine, slightly hinged forward, drying as if I was about 20% through a good morning movement. And the pain was just so intense. I couldn't move. I was stuck there. I eventually was able to sort of straighten myself up. And as the day progressed, couldn't put any pressure on the left leg. It was a really, really intense pain. So the next morning, I woke up and it took me 30 minutes to stand upright. Meave had to help get me out of bed. I just couldn't get vertical, and that's when I knew I was in a bit of trouble. So went and got an MRI, and there were quite a few issues. There was multiple bulges at basically from L2 all the way down to L5, with a little bit of sort of between vertebrae tearing, but unfortunately the L5-S1 joint where the sacrum is compressing that sciatica really badly, which has caused me to not really be able to walk very well and stand up very well. So at this point in time, it looks as though I'll be going in for a potential microdissectomy with the potential for a laminectomy at the same time, depending on once they get in there, which is basically just, in simple terms, open the back up, shave off a little bit of the disc that's causing that compression to create some space on the vertebrae. You've got your lamina. If you think about that little bit of, looks like a rib sticking out the side, they'll then remove that potentially as well to equally create some space in there so that we can move past this. But yeah, man, I said to Scotty when I spoke to him yesterday, I'm like, man, Monday night I went to bed like king of the world, trained like an animal, felt amazing, and literally woke up Tuesday morning and all of a sudden I'm 3 to 6 months away from being able to be at full capacity again. So you just never know.
That's crazy, man. Like, definitely feel for you. When you told me, I was like, oh, geez, this guy doesn't get a break. But, knowing that Alex, who I interviewed on the previous podcast, went through something similar, maybe not as bad as what yours is, but definitely something similar. And I said to you, as soon as he had the surgery, he had instant relief and he was climbing Mount Patua within 6 weeks. So
yeah.
So hopefully.
Yeah. Well, funnily enough, I'm actually booked in with Alex's surgeon. So when we, because Alex was the videographer for the WHPH show, and we were just chatting about it, he gave me his surgeon's detail. I rang him first thing in the morning, and they had some cancellations, which allowed me to sneak in really quickly. So fingers crossed, within a couple of weeks, so I'll be back to myself, man.
Oh, we'll keep us all posted, man. We wish you all the best.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
All right, let's get stuck into it. Obviously, we've got a lot of questions. We have a lot of questions about the Nationals that was on the weekend that I went to in Sydney. Absolutely awesome show. Obviously, a big show to end the season. National event for ICN. Absolutely amazing competitors, great quality. As I kind of said to you before, it was just awesome going to a show to see a lot of people that I've been seeing throughout the season and obviously just be around it. And, with that Sydney venue, it's similar to what we had at NBA. It's like this all-encompassing venue where you've got a hotel there, you've got the venue there, then you've got like a RSL vibe where you've got like a restaurant and all that kind of stuff. So you can literally just go there and not leave. And I think they also have a really, really good gym there too. So it was good to just get out there, see everyone, be amongst it, watch a really, really good show. It was run on time, really, really well. The backstage were great, like amazing helpers there, and it was pretty seamless. So it was a great show to watch, a great way to end the season. And as I said, there was a lot of absolutely amazing competitors from all around the state. I think WA had a massive team. I don't want to butcher these numbers, but I want to say it was like 20 to 30 people. So there was big teams from every single state, which was absolutely amazing. So, kudos to ICN New South Wales for holding an absolutely awesome show. So we got a couple of questions on this specific topic, and I'm going to read out the question as brutal as it comes across. How did Maddie not win? The judging was embarrassing. So if anyone doesn't know, Maddie is my client. She had a very, very successful season, absolutely amazing athlete, incredible physique, obviously got a lot of people talking and a lot of interest and a lot of people following her and being inspired by her, of course. She had won her A and B pro card, her NBA pro card, and then obviously she won the ICN Victorian overall for fitness. And also with that, she got this pro qualifier concept where she was able to go over to the ICN Nationals, compete as an amateur, but also be in the pro lineup. And if she had placed top 3, she gets her pro card. That's just a bit of a backstory on that. Anyways, I really want to try to make sure that, with this podcast, our mission is to try to level up the sport and be positive and constructive in everything that we do say. And what I'm going to say is not going to be disrespectful to anyone, not disrespect to judges, competitors, coaches, or anyone like that. If anything, the competitors were absolutely amazing and deserved all the accolades they got. We're more so coming from a position of trying to give feedback. If anything, market research and telling these people what their customers are actually saying so they can take it on board and maybe have a positive impact on them if they really, really want to. But we're coming from a good place where we're trying to give feedback and also just tell everyone what everyone is thinking and all the discussions that's been had offline about this topic. So, I could kind of keep this to myself if I really wanted to, because, being a director and an owner of a federation, I could probably say, well, I know what everyone's thinking. I'll implement all those changes. So, and I won't tell everyone else, but this is about trying to level up everyone because we all help each other here. So I guess I just wanted to preface with that. Also wanted to preface with the fact that I think it's best that I come across being more fact-based and not having an opinion per se, because people can perceive that as, well, she's your client, you're going to be biased. So I'm going to try to just talk facts. And if you boys want to give your opinion, then you can definitely do so. But I think it's best that I just talk facts at this point in time. So obviously a national event with a lot of people coming from different states. The judging panel was predominantly New South Wales. That's a fact. And the head judge for majority of the time was the Queensland president, who was acting as the head judge. Not something that I've seen before, but again, I've never been to many Queensland shows. Maybe that's normal, I'm not too sure, but that's just the fact of what was going on there. In Maddie's divisions, she was beaten both times by Queensland athletes. Not saying there's a bias there, just saying that potentially that's the preferred look they wanted because there was a Queensland head judge there. So maybe they were looking at a certain lens. But the kind of consensus going into the show by competitors, by supporters, by coaches was that Maddie has the best physique they've ever seen. She's most likely going to win. She's going to be very, very hard to beat. And even after her coming off stage, that was also the consensus and what they thought should have been the fact. Even actually having the competitors and coaches of the people that beat her saying that to me, saying that that's the best physique I've ever seen, best female physique. I literally have the DMs to show it. And that's the kind of conversation that was happening leading up into the show and even after the placings. You could also hear, if you listen to the commentary of the live stream, you actually have the New South Wales president picking her as the winner in the pro show. So, and you can also hear background noise in that live stream of the audience blown away by her and commenting on how absolutely amazing she is. So they're all facts. They're all things that happened. They're not opinion. They're all facts. So obviously that's the way it kind of went down. Maddie got second in her open to an absolutely amazing athlete that, believe it or not, Maddie competed against her at the NBA show, and Maddie was successful in winning against her. And one of the judges that was on the NBA table is actually an ICN judge, and he was at the show at the ICN Nationals, and he believed it should have went a different way too. So there was coaches that thought it should have went a different way. There was a judge that thought it should have went a different way too. So there was a big difference in opinion based on everyone off the judges' table and what they thought compared to what the judges thought. So, if we're trying to educate ourselves, what do we really learn from this? I think some of the takeaways, if they want to take away anything from this, is that maybe we need representatives from all states on the judging panel. There was no Victorian representative there, and not too sure what the case was and how the head judge works in that instance. But I know for other federations, the head judge can potentially be outvoted. So therefore, there'd be no preferred look or bias of which they would like based on maybe their state. And also the head judge, the national judge, is not from a specific state. They are the national judge and they go to every single state. So I think if some of those things were implemented and in place, there potentially could have been a different result. But again, it's a little bit of deja vu, to be honest, because we had this happen at Nationals last season. So I think we had that level of expectation going in anyways, to be honest. And that's the level of expectation that I put towards all my athletes that go into an ICN Nationals is we kind of don't know what we're going to get because of the way the judging is at Nationals and within ICN state by state. So even though the consensus off the table from everyone that was there, everyone that was watching, everyone that is respectable in their opinion, they saw it a different way. But again, we need to respect the judge's decision in the end. Their decision is final. And Maddie was a true athlete. She came off the stage at those points in time and just said to me, what do I need to do better? And of course, there's always things you can do better. I assessed it. I said, look, I think maybe when you do this pose, do this. When you do that, do that. But I said, there's nothing else you can do. That's just the way they see it at the moment, and just go out there and enjoy yourself. And she did that. And she took it like a true athlete, like a true competitor. And I'm really, really proud of her in that fact. And in the end, she was awarded her pro card for placing in the pro lineup. So she achieved something that I don't believe anyone else has achieved this season, which getting pro cards across all the free feds in her division. So in the end, I think she had a very, very successful season. And the opinion of a lot of people is it's probably one of the best natural female athletes they've ever seen. And I think she can definitely take that home and be proud of that. Boys, you obviously watched it. Maybe Scotty, do you have any opinion on it?
Yeah, I did. I watched it, and equally, I probably thought maybe. I mean, we spoke in the lead up to it because obviously we had a conversation around, managing the peak and what you were going to do, etc. And I was pretty confident just knowing what her physique was. It was going to be more than enough. I mean, you never know who's going to turn up on the day, but what Maddie possesses was going to be good enough to get it done. But I did say to you, the only thing that makes me nervous, man, is after what happened in Season B last year, you don't know. And I had that same conversation with Wayne, my competitor, who's similar in the sense that unbeaten all season, pro cards in all the other divisions, pro show winner, all of those things, but you just don't know. And I think when the under 23 division came out and there was that big gap after they'd posed down and then they left the stage, I think they were in almost like a standoff. Someone thinks that maybe she's best suited to perhaps figure, whilst others think, nah, she's just at the very, very top echelon of fitness. Now, it's probably, I use the analogy of like a grade 6 picking on preps. Maddie in an under 23 lineup in fitness is probably that, because she's just on a different level. There's no other 22-year-olds out there, I would say, that are on that level. So I can understand that, but you can only compete against who you go up against. And equally, for me, and this is my professional opinion, as well as my personal opinion, when you make a decision that you've placed her first in that category, they made a definitive answer that you are fitness, because we've seen it happen all the time. And it's happened in IFBB where if someone is outside the scope of the division, they either will place 5th, it's saying that, you got a good physique, but you don't fit the criteria, in which case, had they have done that, then you would have had more clarity. You would have said, we're not going to win opens because they've placed you, 3rd out of a lineup where clearly you're on a different level, and they're just saying that you don't fit the criteria. But when they open the door of saying you're first, so therefore to me, you meet that criteria, I don't know how you can then say in an open class that you don't fit that, unless you're saying that the athletes that she went up against were just simply superior, which professionally, my opinion is I don't agree with it. And also my personal opinion, and that's no bias aside. She's a great young woman. She's got a phenomenal physique, and she, in my opinion, deserved to win that. I think on a size, on a conditioning, the presentation, it ticked all the boxes for me. And equally, even in the pro show, and I think we have similar opinions on this, I probably didn't have 1, 2, 3 in that order. I think if it wasn't going to be Maddie first, the girl who placed second, I probably had her first, and then you would have technically gone the girl that came first, second, and then Maddie. But equally, I think Maddie was first without doubt. So that's my personal opinion. That's my professional opinion. But equally, we say this all the time, that bodybuilding is a subjective sport, and it doesn't make it sting any less. And equally, as a coach and as an athlete, I've been on that side of a decision before as well, and it does hurt. But I think you can learn from it. You can seek feedback. But I think there's definitely an element of wanting consistency. Because, for you, I'm sure you're like, well, if you've given her a green light saying your fitness and placing her first in 23s, what was missing in the open class to not be able to place her first? And again, that's not talking amongst bias. That's just talking facts. And equally, I'm sure the judges have a very good decision as to why. But, I would be very interested to know what was the decision. I would have loved to have been a fly on the table listening to what the decision was being made, because as you said, the commentators were equally of the same decision, and they were actually saying they're going to make a decision here. And I think one of them actually did say, well, they've made a decision, like they've made it they've decided she's fitness, she's not figure, because if she wasn't fitness, she wouldn't have placed first in the 23 division. So that's how I approach it. And again, I don't have any skin in the game towards this. Maddie's not my athlete. Again, I know her, but I don't coach her, and equally not being biased because, you know, obviously my relationship with you, that's just me speaking professionally. And I think you have to be able to sit back and be objective with things like this, but it isn't the first time that it's happened, and it probably won't be the last. So I think it's a good learning curve for everyone as well to understand that you just never know the way that it's going to go sometimes.
What do you think, MG?
Yeah, I won't add too much more, man. I think one of the things they need to be really careful about is commentary. There was some commentary while it was happening around, you know, her potentially being figure, and this is whilst it's all going on. This is, you know, via the commentary. So I think whatever people are hearing in commentary, you got to think a lot of people are going to take that on as correct in words. So just got to bear that in mind. Might the result have been different if this show was run in a different state? In my opinion, yes. But both those top twos, both Maddie and her name's Kira, right? She's a freak, incredible physique, great athlete. They're both phenomenal standouts. I see what everyone is saying, and you know, I think that, you know, the biggest takeaway for them needs to be exactly what MT says. If you're going to have a national show, there needs to be a national judging panel, not just, you know, 2 states.
Yeah, I think well said, boys. I think we'll leave it there. Hopefully, as we said, we're coming from a place of respect and, you know, trying to level up and have a positive impact. So, like, we really hope that maybe they're listening and they take some of this on board, because we're trying to come from a good place here, to be honest. And we really just giving the feedback of what the majority are saying and what their customers are saying. And if their customers aren't going to say it directly, they're probably going to say it to us. And it's probably good that we speak for them, but maybe they'll vote in other ways, and hopefully it doesn't affect them in any way. All right. But we will keep talking about nationals because there was a couple of other things. And you mentioned about commentary. There was another question about the placings in the pro show and amateurs, but I think that was to do with Maddie. So we're just going to leave that one to the side. About the commentary. So someone said commentary was great in the live stream for ICN. Will NBA be considering doing this? So I actually sat back with Stewie and we spoke about it, to be honest. And I hadn't listened to the commentary because I was there live, right? So I actually, when I was on the plane on the way home, I had a bit of a listen. And I had an opinion of, I think you've either got to go in 2 other directions. One is you have commentary that comes from a place of entertainment, and the person's not going to give any judging decisions or feedback, and it's just entertainment. And maybe they know the athletes, they can talk about the history, they can talk about, oh, yep, number 57, she's amazing, she just did this state and she won this. And you can kind of give a background story about each person that's on there and give some entertainment value. Or you can go the complete other end of the spectrum, and it's a proper judge that's on there and they're giving a judging opinion and they're explaining what's happening and what the judges are seeing. I think somewhere in the middle doesn't work too well, because you're going to get some people that are entertaining but therefore aren't the best judge, and vice versa. So you can get a mixed opinion and mixed commentary there. So I think it's good that there is commentary. I think it can add some value, but I think you just need to really pick on what type of commentary you do have. I don't know if we're going to implement it for NBA at this point in time. It's not something that we think will add value at the moment. I think more we're going to put our focus in on the actual show itself, and then just having a good quality live stream that makes you feel like you're there. And then obviously we're going to be doing the review, which actually I'm doing tomorrow morning with Stu, of the placings and the decisions for the placings. So literally sitting down with the national head judge and discussing placings that happened at nationals for NBA. What do you boys think? Because you obviously were listening to it live. What do you think, Scotty?
I didn't love it, but also there were definitely periods where perhaps it implied perhaps bias towards certain athletes that were maybe from certain states in different divisions. I think if you were going to do it, it would be better to have someone who is just, you know, a custodian of the sport, who doesn't have any affiliation to the coaches, to different athletes, to whoever it may be. It's just, it could be, say, someone like you had Bridge, who was like, she's going to commentate. She isn't a judge with NBA. She doesn't coach anyone. She knows who a lot of the competitors are and can perhaps give some intellect, perhaps, okay, maybe the judges went this decision because of X, Y, and Z. But I mean, there were certainly divisions where, you know, some of the athletes were well known, I think, to the commentators, and it was it was at some point, it was just, for me, it was hard to listen. Like, I actually had to mute it. And especially when it was just, yeah, that's all I'll say on that.
Okay. MG, how about you? Did you have a listen to it?
Yeah, man. Yeah, I hated it, to be honest. In at periods, yeah, I had to mute as well. I think it can work one way only, and maybe this is just my personality and how my creative brain works in this sense. I reckon it would work better if a commentator, when you registered as an athlete, you gave a little bit of a background as to where you train, or if there's anything that, you know, you did to get to the stage that was special, or anyone that, you know, helped you. And maybe the commentator could say, oh, welcome, next on the stage we've got competitor 46, trains out of this gym in Ballarat, been training for 3 years, what a great physique, move on to the next one. I think that is probably a more for someone who's watching on a live stream to get some benefit off, because what you don't want is a judge talking in the live stream, giving advice, and then the judges pick 3 completely different winners. It just makes you look like an idiot. So I think some background on the athlete, maybe a special story if there is one, or anything else that's worth a mention, and that's it, man.
I like that. So you're more coming from like an entertainment standpoint.
Sure.
Yep.
For sure. Absolutely. Yep.
I like that. I think that makes it a bit clearer too. So the judging is left on the judging table.
Yeah.
And yep.
Yeah. Like, even to the point, it's like, welcome next, you know, competitor 40. This is Scotty Morrell. It's actually Scotty's 9th show. Scott won a show just 2 years ago in this state. He's been prepping for 28 weeks. Like, you know, man, like, to those 3 pieces, it's like, oh, cool. I know Scotty now. Who's next? That, to me, as a listener, is better than having, you know, people who only know half the athletes pick apart these athletes.
Mate, if we do commentary for NBA, we know who we're going to be asking to do it.
So I just think that would add a lot of value for a lot of people.
Yeah, I like it. I like it. All right, let's move on. Still on the same topic. I noticed some quite different placings for competitors between ICN and NBA. What would you say is the main difference between the judging in the federations? So I think we covered one of the main differences is that we have a national judge that travels to every single show. So we have that consistency there. And at the national show, we have people from every state, a representative from every state. So that's going to be one of the key differences. But if we're just talking about criteria of divisions, I'd say the broadest way to kind of explain it is that across the divisions for NBA, you just turn the dial up a little bit more. You know, from a conditioning, muscularity standpoint, you just turn the dial up a little bit more if you're going into NBA. I think especially from a bikini perspective, looking at some of the bikini athletes that were placing really, really well at ICN, I think it would have been a little bit different if they were doing an NBA show. So I think that's probably one of the main differences there. Next, we had, this was from someone that watched the ICN Nationals. Back double bicep for men's fitness at Nationals. Why is posing so different in WA versus over at the East Coast? So I didn't see that, but Scotty, did you notice men's fitness guys throwing in some back biceps?
Yeah, so it happens a lot in Queensland and in WA, where when they do their rear pose, they do their rear, you know, their rear lat spread, so to speak, or their rear pose. And then when they're being chosen to hold it, they'll usually like go up, hit a flex, squeeze it, then bring it back down and reset it. And it started to happen and creep in a lot more and more. And if it's a tough decision and someone does that and they maybe have a really nice rear double, sometimes I think it can almost sway a judge to being like, wow, there's a bit of muscularity there. And so the more that it started to occur, I think it's starting to happen more and more. I had that conversation with Wayne saying that if you feel that people on stage are doing that, you need to do that too, because even though it's not within the criteria, your rear double is incredible. And so you don't normally show it because we stay within the parameters in Victoria, and if essentially you'd be marked down. But when you go to New South Wales or Queensland or WA, well, a lot of their athletes do that. So I'm like, if they're going to do that, then you need to do that too, because if they're going to step over the line, then essentially you have to as well. Otherwise, it could potentially compromise you. So it definitely happened, and it happened in the open and it happened in the overall, but both the competitors were doing it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think also with Maddie, we made her pose, let's call it New South Wales or Queensland style, in her front pose, where it's a more hips forward, front on front pose, because in Victoria, we mostly do, let's call it an IFBB front pose, where it's like a side on, hip side on front pose. So we made that adjustment too the week before the show, but like, this is the way they like you to pose. We need to pose this way. And luckily she did, because she looked just like everyone else and they could compare her equally to everyone else. So yeah, you're always going to get some different things where different states do different things. We love standardization and we are trying to shoot for that in NBA. And that's why I like the IFBB model, is because every state you go to, every pose is the same. It's done a certain way. And I really, really love that. I think because we have the eye walk, it allows you to show your personality and hit that back double bicep if you want to hit it and those kind of things. But then when you're being judged, it's static and you need to be in the same pose as everyone else so you can be judged and be compared. So yeah, that's the answer to that question there. Another one while we're just talking about feds. Do you think NBA will eventually have a Masters Pro card like other feds? We actually do. So yeah, we do. At national level, if you do a Masters division and the judges believe that you are pro standard, you will get a pro card. So yeah, we actually do it. Okay, let's go on to some other ones. Let's go into something completely different, Scotty. Do you guys structure deloads for self or for your clients? Do you let them tell you when they need one? Does the frequency change? Do you find everyone needs different frequency?
Yeah, I do. I tend to devolume a little bit more than, say, a deload per se, just because usually it's just the accumulation of the volume, especially if, say, if it's in the improvement season and even if it's in prep. I think some people devolume periodically, which I don't necessarily agree with, because I think it's one of those things you don't want to waste time. If you do it every 8 weeks and you're essentially losing 6-7 weeks of progress per year, versus ideally, if your training and your periodization is good, I think, a devolume sort of every 3 months is probably within that scope, provided that it's warranted and that you've accumulated the necessary peripheral and systemic fatigue in order to, I guess, need to actually have it. And I think the benefit of a devolume is you might have someone that trains 5 times a week. You might give them, 4 rest days in a row and then reduce total volume allotment. Stuff like that is what I'll usually do. I programmed a devolume for an athlete this morning, and he usually trains 5 times a week and he's training 4 times a week, but equally he's not doing any intensification sets. He's not doing any more than 2 sets, some exercises. He's doing 1, but the intensity remains the same. So we're still creating a stimulus, but there's nowhere near the same amount of fatigue that comes with that. And that paired with, he's in the improvement season, so he doesn't need more food. But if he was in prep, we'd look at, potentially adding, say, a period of additional food or refeeding or a mini diet break, if you will, to help combat that, bring them back up to maintenance and really wash off that fatigue and then go again. So I definitely think there's a place for it, but like all things, context and obviously knowing whether you actually need one versus you just want to have one because you just feel like having a cruisier week.
Awesome. All right, let's move on to the next one. I'm going to start with you, MG, on this one. How do you approach check-ins for clients that are uncomfortable with taking progress photos?
Yeah, man, it's a difficult one. It just sort of depends on what the goal is. I think, if it's somebody that does have a stage goal at some point in time, if you're planning on standing on stage in front of, between 200 and 1,000 people, you're probably going to want to start getting comfortable with taking some check-in photos by yourself. If it's an athlete that doesn't necessarily have a stage goal, I'm still very much encouraging those athletes to try and take some photos. Maybe not as often as weekly, maybe it's fortnightly or monthly at the most, just because I think it's really important, not only for accountability, but to be able to sit back after 4 weeks, which is, an amount of time that you can make substantial changes and actually be able to, have a comparison that the athlete can look back and be really, really proud of. And one of the things that I say to my athletes and, for coaches out there who are not sure how to kind of get uncomfortable people to take photos is just reminding them that, this is the before and we are working towards the after, but we do need somewhere to start. I also discuss regularly that it is only one metric and there are a million other metrics that we use to be able to determine progression. But as a physique athlete, and I'll assume that this is going to be for a physique athlete, remember that, this is something that you're going to have to do very, very often in front of a lot of people. And, there's no better time than start doing it than very, very early on in the process. Maybe as a coach, you might say to that athlete, hey, I understand you're uncomfortable. Let's start doing them fortnightly for now until they get to a level where they do feel a little bit more comfortable. And, as you go through prepping, everyone who's out there who's competed, it's really hard to do check-in photos at 26 weeks out. But my God, when I'm 3 weeks out, I want to send them to Scott every day because I'm waking up and I'm seeing every new line. So just know it's okay to feel uncomfortable with your photos if you're at the end of your off season or the middle of your off season or the start of your prep. It's going to get a hell of a lot easier as that journey unfolds, but it's still really important to do them at all stages. For as I said, for that level of accountability and just to be able to determine, your genuine progression, because sometimes the scale doesn't indicate absolutely everything. Yeah, it's an important piece of data, but me personally, and I say this to my athletes all the time, when you stand on stage and the guy next to you looks great and you look great, the judge isn't going to say, yeah, but number 76 weighs a kilo less. They don't give a shit what you weigh. So the aesthetic is so important. So the aesthetic needs to be one of the things that we're judging and assessing as we progress through the process of prep.
Yeah, I think, you most likely find that people find it a little bit uncomfortable to take progress photos in the off season. When they're the fluffiest, that's when they kind of they want to be a bit reserved in when they take the photos. So I think a really, really good starting point is to tell them that you need to take it at the start of a program, at the end of a program, so we can see progress at least. That's normally like a 8-week or more, time between photos, but at least that's a good way to sell it. And then when they do take photos, really go into some big in-depth analysis for them so you can compare them and really add a lot of value. So then they go, oh, that was valuable. Taking photos, I got a lot out of that. And then normally you can then start to get them on board with taking more photos more often, especially if they find them valuable. So I think that's one of the really, really key points. What do you think, Scotty, on that?
Yeah, I agree. I think I do in the improvement season, I do photos periodically. So at the end of each mesocycle, similar, because you're not going to see a significant aesthetic change on a week-to-week basis like you would in a contest prep. And I think it's good as well to start to collect data so that you can see, okay, this is what this look at roughly this composition at this weight looks like at this stage. You might be 6 weeks into your improvement season and then you revisit, say, 12 months from that state, you may be the same weight, you compare the pictures and there's a really big difference. Whereas if you only take them when you feel comfortable, then obviously you're limiting, in my opinion, getting some really good, valuable data. But it's one of those things, I think it's always uncomfortable when you don't feel amazing and maybe you don't look amazing. But I think as long as you just take them, you send them through, you don't give it a second thought. It's like anything, the more that you do it, the more comfortable you sort of start to become with it.
Yeah, definitely. Mm-hmm. All right. So on that topic of off-season, would you ever reduce calories in the off-season to see where things are sitting? Or do you completely wait until comp prep? I'm assuming this person means, do you ever, as Scotty would call it, take a peek under the hood during the off-season?
You definitely do. Well, I think it's important to do so. Obviously, in the improvement season, you want to mini cut as infrequently as possible because you want to maximize time spent in a state of positive energy availability so that you can facilitate good quality training and recovery and adaptation. But there are times where you need to create a little bit more runway so that you can push back up again. So I think if you're dieting or mini cutting every sort of 3 to 4 months, you're probably gaining at too much of a rapid rate. Granted, there's caveats to that. I mean, someone like, say, Ethan, for example, his last off season, we didn't mini cut once. We spent almost 3 years in a positive state, but he was gaining maybe 600 to 800 grams a month. And we ran an 8 to 10 week pre-prep phase. And that was all that we needed versus if we had to run, 2 mini cuts a year. I think 2 mini cuts a year is probably around the mark. But if you can get away with only having to do one, I would always rather, if I can, do one, be aggressive, be assertive, clean up a decent chunk, and then give yourself another bout of runway and almost treat that mini cut literally like it's a contest prep. There's no meals out, there's no deviation. We're all in because then I spend less time having, maybe it's a 5-week fat loss phase instead of an 8-week fat loss phase. I'd much rather do that and then take those extra 3 weeks, and they're weeks that I can be improving and making deposits as opposed to withdrawals. So I think it's definitely important, but also your physique when you're in a lengthy improvement season is going to change. You have gaps, when you do your SWOT analysis and you identify areas that need a little bit more attention. When you've started to fill some of those gaps, it might be 12 months. And then as I use the they're saying you take a peek underneath the hood and then you're like, okay, cool, we've made some progress here. In actual fact, now we need to start to bring everything back up, because if you don't do those, I guess, checkpoint assessments, then you could start to lose track of where the actual aesthetics are. You know, it's not just building a massive physique. You need to have balance and you need to have symmetry. So as a result of that, your volume allotment within, you know, a program is going to be dependent on where you need to essentially add tissue, or potentially where you can afford to not have to press as hard on. So I think it's really important to do that. But as always, context and understanding when to obviously to pull the trigger on it.
So would you have, let's just call it round numbers, because I know context is important, but after a prep is done and they go through the reverse and they're comfortably in the off season and they're at their off season weight, when would you do a first mini cut? Does it have to be 6 months post comp, 9 months, 12? Like, is there a time where you don't want to do it at a certain month post comp? Is there normally like a common range you find yourself in that, okay, now we're in a position where you can do a peek under the hood?
Yeah, I think, I mean, not to reinforce or reiterate what you just said, context, because I feel like I'm kind of giving an open-ended answer, but it is important because things such as how was the recovery phase, reverse phase, how is the relationship with food with the athlete? Are they at a point where they've reached their ceiling in terms of any more composition gain and they're just getting really unnecessarily soft? They're things that you need to factor in. But again, I had one of my athletes who competed last season, who would now be, like 7 and a bit months since prep, who's at a stage starting to feel uncomfortable and has flagged, I'd love to run a tidy up phase. But knowing that we're also going to be competing in season B next year, and we had some setbacks in the early portion due to some medical stuff in the first phase, having an operation and whatnot. So we didn't get that first clear bit of runway to really go hard. And so looking at the aesthetics of this athlete, even though they feel uncomfortable, I think they look phenomenal. I'm like, we have so much more room to push up. They're a lot heavier than their previous stage weight, but they've equally never been in this state before. They're not doing the things in the gym that they're doing now. So looking at their longitudinal periodization, and I put it to them literally in their check-in on Monday, saying that I think, given that we are going to run a pre-prep phase and we're going to make sure we start in a really good spot so that we don't have as much to lose the next time around we compete, I think we can get away with not necessarily having to run a mini cut until we run our pre-prep phase, which will be at the back end of the year. Granted, it'll be a little bit earlier perhaps than it usually would be for a pre-prep phase, but that then saves us probably a 5-week dieting phase now, and then, you know, still probably having to run a decent pre-prep phase later. So I'd rather take those extra 4 or 5 weeks, maximize improvement. And then, yeah, we will have to be a little bit more assertive in the pre-prep phase, but I know that I can pull fat mass off this, you know, this person like there's no tomorrow. So she'll be more than fine. And essentially that was our plan. But originally we had decided we might run a 4-week tidy up around that July period. But again, this is why I always say you need to auto-regulate, and the plan changes sometimes. I had no idea that, you know, they were going to look this amazing at this weight, doing these things in the gym. So I'm not about to you know, start trying to bring things down now or derail it. Progress is on the up. So, you know, keep it rolling.
Yeah, awesome. So, yeah, if you want to give some round numbers again, Scotty, what would a, you know, peek under the hood, fluff cut, mini cut, how long, how short would it normally be? And then when do you normally put in a pre-prep phase, and how long is that?
So again, you're going to hate the response that it is dependent on the individual, because if I use Galanti or myself for an example, can run a 4-week, you know, dieting phase, or even Riley Timms is another great example, and can pull off 9 or 10 kilos in that time very uninvasively. Go hard. None of us ever really do cardio. If you had to, you could do that and then bring things back up. But we could also probably lose that over 8 weeks if we wanted to, but there's no recoil in a short aggressive phase like that, because the risk to rewards there. Yeah, by week 4, starting to get a little bit hungry, but that also is advantageous if you've been eating 5,000 calories, because you can resensitize hunger as well. But then there's also times where you have athletes that just take a bit longer to respond, and maybe they need 8 weeks to pull off 6 or even 5 kilograms. So it would depend on that. But basically, you need to know where do you think your stage weight is going to be. And again, assessing based on the parameters of where their physique is at, and also perhaps where previous off seasons have been at, how much fat mass do you think can they drift away from that point? Bearing in mind that if you're running a 24-week prep, you don't really want to have to lose more than, in my opinion, probably 16-17% of body weight, because then you've probably started too soft and you're losing time at the end where you can afford to go slower. In terms of a pre-prep phase, I typically will either run them October, November, leading into Christmas. And I like to do that so that we'll pull off a decent chunk, almost get within maybe 10% of where stage weight would be, reverse, have some flexibility over Christmas, and then they would start their contest prep. But equally, sometimes we'll run it literally right after Christmas, and then it's 6 to 8 weeks, and it's a little bit more aggressive. And then from there, it'll be sort of 4 to 5 weeks of cruising and more or less just maintaining and then starting the prep. Or, I mean, we use you as an example, MT. We're doing something very different with your season for next year, where we're going to run a bit of a pre-prep phase. We're going to dig a bit harder earlier, but we're also going to have a bit of time where we're going to chill out and be able to give back to the system when you would essentially be, say, 16 weeks out. But if you're within, 4 kilos of striking distance at that point, we know that we can afford to do that when you're busier with NBA shows and your work and your athletes, etc. So I think if you know the athlete well and you've got good data, and equally you're very good in regards to periodization, you can set it up however you please. But I think giving yourself more time within the prep to not have to dig all the way up to the end, it just results in a more fresher athlete and a more enjoyable experience, because you're not limping to the finish line.
Love it. I think you covered it really, really well, Scotty, as you always do. And I think that kind of gives people a lot of context for sure. One more about off-season calories and macros while we're on this topic, and we got another question about it. So off-season calories and macros, my coach keeps my fats pretty low in an off-season. I want to know if there's a reason for this. Context for my fats is that during prep, they were around about 16 to 18 grams. And in the off-season, they're sitting around about 45 to 50. Now, based on those numbers, I'm assuming it's a female because they are pretty low. Is there any reason that you would keep fats down in an off-season, Scotty?
Not really. I mean, if you're trying to preference carbohydrate, but I mean, I wouldn't say that 50 grams of fat for a female in the off-season is low at all. Most of my athletes would be within that range. I mean, for context, my fats don't ever really go above 60, 65, just because it makes me feel sluggish and I can't get in all the carbohydrate I need to, and everyone's going to be different. But fats are important for sex hormone production and cell function, etc., but they are more calorically dense. So, I mean, if you're talking about 15 grams of fat, what's that? 135 calories. I'm guessing this person would have been on pretty low food, because typically, 20% of your caloric intake, I think, is kind of like the threshold of where you would want your fats to be coming from. But when you're talking about females, you need to be mindful that does, have recoil in regards to sex hormone production, the menstrual cycle, and things of that nature. So I think you need to be a little bit careful. I don't think I've ever brought any females' fats that low. I think that's pretty low. I'd still usually keep them a little bit lower, and equally, I'd keep carbohydrate a bit lower if I'm really digging them, because I'm able to induce lipolysis, which is probably going to be a bit better. And I think as much as we want to get athletes leaner, sometimes you may run out of rope. And so I think there's probably a threshold where usually you don't really want to be going much lower than 15%, because then you're going to start to compromise some of the health markers, even more so than perhaps a period of, lengthy energy deprivation. So to answer that, I think 15 is very, very low, but maybe your coach has a reason behind that. I'm not too sure, but I think 50 grams in the off season is more than fine.
What do you think, MG? What's typical female kind of sitting at in the off season from a
Man, I would say that, I mean, I've got the exception of a few female athletes who, again, are in a sort of different genetic spot that, eat upwards of 65. But I would say that 75% of my female athletes are between 45 and 60. And I don't think I've ever been below 25, man. But if you think about that athlete, if you were on 15 or 16, I think you said in your prep, and you're on 48, it is 300% difference. So, it is a substantial difference to where you were from. So, again, you guys got to relate it back to where you were. How far past prep are you now? If you've gone from 20 and it's 3 months past and you're at 45, I don't think that that's still super low in in the scheme of where you were.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm kind of the same. Like most female athletes that are similar size in the offices are going to sit between that 50 to 60 mark, unless for whatever reason their food preference, they just want a little bit higher fat because that's what they enjoy and that's going to help them be more adherent to their diet, then sure, we bump it up a little bit more. Or if their carbs are getting so high that it's just really hard to have some good variety and palatable food, then maybe we bump it up a little bit more. But I'm just saying they're more so outliers. The typical is going to sit between that 50 and 60 mark for sure. All right, episode 100 done. 101 coming up next week. And Scotty, I don't know if you boys saw that last episode, I was with Alex in the podcast studio. It was absolutely epic, and I cannot wait till you're back, Scotty, so we can start doing that on a weekly basis and get all three of us in there and have some really, really good discussions, because even though we know each other and we, vibe very, very well, when you're sitting next to someone, it's just on a different level. So I cannot wait for all of us to be there together. And Scotty, when are you going to be back? When are you coming? Tell us.
I'm going to be back in less than a month now. So today is the 28th, and I fly back on the 25th of June. We fly back, and a little stopover in Bali for a couple of days, and then I will be touchdown in Melbourne on the weekend of the 29th. So yeah, potentially we have to work out the logistics. I had a brief conversation with UMT about that. I've got to re-lock down all my schedule of when we're going to run it, and obviously if we go into Alex's studio to do that, which is awesome. Potentially even that first week I'm back, I'm probably going to be pretty jet lagged, and there may not be a whole heap of quality cognitive function, so you boys might have to carry me, but I'm sure a few monsters and some good vibes will be able to get us through. So that'll be good. Not long to go, man.
I might be in a wheelchair, so MT, you might be carrying all of us.
Try my best.
Yeah, you got it.
Well, I can swing past your place, bro, and I'll just literally pick you up and I'll carry you, and I can put you in one of the kids' car seats or something, so you're nice and safe and buckled in.
Another exciting piece of news. So Mev and I have just bought a new house, which is exciting. And of course, one of the criteria was that it is less than a 5-minute drive from Scotty Morell's house. And I did manage to tick that box. So officially moving just get the keys 2 days before you get back. So right in time for you to come and give me a hand to move right when you get back.
I did say to you, bro, if you need a chop out, I'm more than happy to. I know you probably will be out of action, and I know you're going to hire a company, but I'm pretty good at giving orders and directing, so I can hold a coffee and tell them where to put stuff and not to break anything.
I think Scotty's also pretty good at lifting too, so I'm sure he's pretty strong and he'll be able to lift some stuff. And I'm here for it too if you need me.
Delegation and direction, I like that better.
Yeah. Looking forward to it, man.
You take care. Thanks everyone for listening. Episode 100 done and dusted. We'll chat to you soon.